We all did real scally things. We felt restricted at home, so we went a bit wild when we got out. With the company we kept, it's a wonder we didn't end up in a detention centre. When Noel was 15 or 16, him and a mate robbed our local sweet shop. They just stuck their hands in the till and ran out with 12 pence. Or maybe it was 20 pence. Hardly the crime of the century, but I think our Noel ended up getting a caution off the police and solitary confinement and a good hiding from me dad. The first time I heard the Jam was when I bought the single, In the City, in 1977. I thought Paul Weller was the coolest, hippest guy around. I had all the gear. An original American fishtail parka, a brown two-tone suit, pencil-thin ties. I had numerous fights and 2 parkas slashed with Stanley knives on separate occasions. That's where I got my nickname. I was Bod the Mod, but I hate that name, which is why Noel and Liam still delight in using it. Youngie and I were the odd bods because we're the only 2 mods in Burnage. At that time Noel was a bit mixed up. He didn't know what he was, punk, rockabilly, Smiths freak. He was all over the place. His favourite band were the Sex Pistols until he discovered the Smiths, and he looked a right balloon in his yellow tartan trousers with zips and rips everywhere. Then he was a rockabilly, wearing a donkey jacket with a big Confederate flag on the back and a goon haircut. Music was an escape. We were all lucky to have Mr. Sifter's record shop, owned by Peter Howard. The shop sold mainly second-hand records and rarities. Noel and I have bought records there for 18 years. We used to love going through the racks of old vinyl, albums, 7-inch singles and picture discs. Sometimes I'd come across some rare 7-inch piece of vinyl and the hairs on the back of my neck would rise. I'd be that excited. There were rare occasions when the odd record disappeared up the front of my original American fishtail parka. But I'll always repay you, Peter, by advertising your shop as one of the biggest influences behind the greatest band in the world today. Because of the company I kept, I got roped into all things parents warn you about. Glue sniffing, petty crime, burglary, you name it. I was to some extent an accessory. I was quite shocked when Liam said that his favourite drug was glue. It was probably a wind-up, but I don't know every single thing he got up to in his teenage years. I just daydreamed my way through 5 years of school at St. Mark's, so I left without taking any exams. For some reason we always ended up hanging around in Levenshulme, where the action isn't. When you're on the dole and all your mates are working, it's the worst feeling in the world. But in Levenshulme, neither Noel nor my good self felt any stigma, as everybody else was out of work, and potless, skint. We tried playing football all day, but it didn't fill the void and that emptiness we all embraced in adolescence. There weren't that many nice girls in Levenshulme, so we moved to pastures new. Reddish Vale in Stockport was a bit on the rough side, but the girls were more numerous and easily impressed, especially if you had a Manc accent. Noel's quiet exterior actually worked in his favour. Plenty of girls would think of him as shy, but strong and silent and deep. Self-obsessed and moody would have been more like it. My 18th birthday was spent on a freezing night in the middle of January on Greenbank playing fields with 2 girls and a few bottles of cider. One of the girls, Paula, I took a particular fancy to, and that night was a roaring success. That was my 18th birthday, budget style. At Reddish Vale, the local lads would all run off home when they saw a large group of Levenshulme lads. Including Noel and me, there would have been about 20 of us. Noel only hung out with us occasionally. I was glad he was there on one particular night, when he decided to go to the rougher end of Reddish Vale and really show the locals who was boss. We started chasing these biker guys, calling them names and threatening to give them a kicking. Suddenly one of them stopped his bike, pulled out an air rifle and opened fire. He was joined by a very mean-looking bunch of 15 to 20 older lads. We ran for what looked like some school playing fields, but first we had to get over a fence. It was covered in that anti-climbing paint, and I can't climb over. Noel, who'd already got to the top of the fence, was pulling me up by my jacket, which ripped. I was yards away from getting a group kicking when I finally scrambled over. Noel started to think we were all losers, and it was beginning to look that way to me too. I had a mate with his own flat. We crashed there at night sometimes, dropping acid with Youngie. One time I came across Youngie and another couple of lads in a beat-up old brown Triumph Dolomite about 1 in the morning. They told me to get in, so I went with them to Wally Range, an area of huge old houses. I was told to wait, so I waited while they went off to do a few houses. I could hear an alarm sounding, and by the time they got back with the gear, the police had arrived. They tried to stop us, hanging onto the car, but we drove off, went too fast round the corner, and 200 yards from where we'd left the coppers we crashed. Youngie and me ran off in different directions. The police were searching for us. I crawled into some bushes in the back garden and lay there, hardly breathing. I attentively rose from the bushes as light was breaking, and then literally ran all the way to Levenshulme and our mate's safe flat. It amuses me when the press gets so hot under the collar about our Noel burgling houses. He knew Youngie, who was notorious at one time. I can't see it myself. Noel could have been a lookout, as he was quick and crafty, but I'm not swallowing that burglary bullshit. We carried on dabbling in drugs like amphetamines and LSD. One of the last times I took drugs was in 1984 when I was 18. It was just before we left our dad. After that I didn't feel the need. Noel wasn't that big into drugs at that time. He'd have a bit of cannabis, but didn't every kid back then? I don't think anything stronger appealed to him. Noel got high on his Smiths records. He was that ultimate box-room rebel waiting to break free. Noel could handle being out of work better than me, because it gave him more time for his music, and he had Louise to keep him sane and confident. My dad said I should go and work for him. I wasn't keen, but my mum wasn't working at the time and I needed to be out earning. Working for my dad was no treat. Still, I'd normally come out with about £100 a week plus my social security money. When Noel left school, he was in a similar situation, so he worked for Dad too. Now, Noel is the hardest working man in pop music. He likes playing the guitar, writing songs and being in a band, so he will work hard. Get him on a building site, however, and that staunch work ethic is non-existent. Noel once said that I had a God-given talent for digging holes. Compared to Noel, a one-armed dwarf with a bad case of arthritis had a talent for digging holes. Noel was never that strong physically, and he was a right lazy git. He didn't take to any physical labouring jobs, but he was smart and had it all sussed. He could hide and doss about for hours without getting caught. Our mum had been legally separated from our dad for years. We were desperate for her to find us another house away from him. Things started to go right the day my dad slipped a disc, quite badly at work. He was taken into hospital for an operation on his spine, and it was nearly 2 months before he came home. After 2 months of peace he was back, a bigger pain in the neck than ever. Finally my mum got us a council house on the other side of Burnage, about a mile away. We did a midnight flyer when my dad was out one Friday night, and by the time he returned the next morning we were gone. The press never seemed to get this right. To quote from the Daily Star, among others, Tommy Gallagher's family walked out on him 11 years ago after songwriter Noel, then a teenager, beat him up in a bloody brawl following years of violence. Noel has said, "The last time I saw him was when 2 paramedics were carrying him out of the house to hospital." Those first few weeks of life without father was sheer bliss. It's hard to explain that sense of freedom. You'll hear it in Noel's song lyrics, those lines about breaking out and being free, and his appreciation of what our mother did for us. Liam did resent it for a while, but only because his mates were all round our old house. As for my father, he never dared come round. I suspect he was glad to see the end of his responsibilities. He was supposed to pay a certain amount of money to our mum for Liam, but he never did. Money was tight at the new house, so in order for Noel and me to make some decent wages, we still had to go out to work on the building sites with dearest Daddy. He wasn't bothered that we left. It may have been what he wanted all along, but it wouldn't have gone down well in that Irish community he was so fond of. There was a lot of shame attached to your wife and kids leaving you. I moved on to Kennedy's civil engineering and got Noel a job there. When he first started he was working outside with me, digging holes, as he and Liam always put it. Noel couldn't handle the outside graft. In fact, he hated it. Later, when Liam came to work at Kennedy's, it was the same scenario. He didn't like the outside graft, and he wouldn't let me or any of these other Irish blokes teach him how to handle the spade properly. Liam worked on and off, but more often than not he was on the dole scrounging money from me and my mum. He ended up staying on at school until he was 17, which meant he kicked around doing odd jobs and signing on for 18 months or so before he joined Oasis. It's scary to think that though Noel, Liam and myself are different in many ways, we've all inherited loads of bad traits from